If you ever find yourself in Montgomery Bell State Park in Tennessee, you better not get lost. Because if you hear the sound of a woman screaming, it's too late. Y'all, today we are talking about the White Bluff Screamer, and buckle up because she's got a few twists. She's got one twist, mainly in the middle. But fuck it, she's got multiple twists. The White Bluff Screamer has been haunting, or should I say hunting, hint hint, the people of Dixon County, Tennessee for almost 100 years. Which honestly, when it comes to urban legends, that's kind of young. She's just a little baby. Just a little baby doing her best. She'll get there. The countless sightings and legends and theories about the White Bluff Screamer honestly leave more questions than answers. Namely, what the hell is it? Is it some kind of evil spirit? Is it something worse? Well, not worse, but different. Different, but also kind of the same. Well, we'll talk about it. The OG White Bluff Screamer story takes place in the late 1920s. It's said that in an effort to find a more peaceful, quiet life, a World War I veteran moved himself, his wife, his 7 kids aged 6 to 14, also God bless his wife because they didn't have epidural back then, and his 2 hunting dogs to the hollers of Trace Creek, Tennessee. The fuck is a holler? I wrote this whole thing, I don't even know what... Oh, okay, it's like a valley. So he moved him to a valley. This was a really popular concept at the time, like IRL, especially with World War I veterans, because their mindset was, man, that was kind of crazy how the whole world fought with each other. Glad that's never going to happen again. What? You want me to talk about what I went through? Why would I do that when I can just scream at my wife and kids every time I hear a weird noise? I won't even go on vacation with my family. We spend more than 30 minutes together and we fight. I can't imagine moving to a place where they're the only people there. Although I do recognize this was a different time. They were probably all fucking each other, to be honest. Also, when I say they moved there, it's not like there was a house there. They built a house by hand. They cut down trees. They started building a cabin. I'm pretty sure they soldered something. I don't know how to build things. And they even planted their own crops. Now, I couldn't find anything in this account of this very fictional man that says that he had any cattle. So we could have a vegan king on our hands. For several months, the family is having a great time. It's peaceful, it's quiet, it's exactly what the man wanted. His wife is like, honestly, I was gonna take the kids and go back to live with my parents, but you killed it. It's everything he ever could have wanted. Until one night, the entire family is awoken by the terrible, blood-curdling sound of a woman screaming. It sounds like a woman is being murdered. The man lights a torch and he begins walking around the perimeter of a cabin. And already, this man is way more proactive than I would ever be. I'm a huge fan of pretending that things aren't happening while also being way too stressed about it to focus on anything else. He realizes that the sound is coming from deep in the woods, and so he tells them that it's probably an animal that died and it'll be gone within the morning. Honestly, I don't believe you. I think you just don't want to go out there and deal with it. And honestly, same, I kind of respect it. But sure enough, the next morning, the sound is gone. The family all breathes a sigh of relief. The kids are making fun of each other. They're like, you were so scared last night? No, I wasn't. Yeah, you were. I saw you piss yourself. I do that every night. Really? Everybody's okay until the next night when the screaming comes back, and this time it's louder. The man doesn't really know what to do. He wants to go explore and see what's going on, but he's not familiar enough with the forest or the area to feel confident about exploring it. So he says, tomorrow morning, I'll go out there, I'll see what it is. The next morning, he spends the entire day. He's looking up trees, he's digging up bushes, he's bothering all the wildlife. He can't find any possible thing that could be causing this sound. It comes back that night. And it comes back every night after that. And it's louder, and it lasts longer, and it's more desperate. At this point, the man is obsessed. I think it would help the context to know that in my head, I imagine this man is played by Hugh Jackman. But not like Wolverine Hugh Jackman, like Prisoners Hugh Jackman. He is unhinged. He's out there, he's screaming at the wildlife, he's chopping down trees, he's ripping things up. He's just obsessively walking around trying to figure out what's causing this noise. He's not talking to his family. They're at home trying to keep the farm going because he's gone. And to make it worse, none of them are sleeping because every night the sound of a woman screaming is blasting out of the woods. Finally, he's had enough. And so one evening, he takes a torch, a rifle, and his 2 hunting dogs, and he waits on his front porch. I'm gonna say something, and I'm very aware that this is not gonna be a popular opinion. It's not gonna make me look good, but I would put every man, woman, and child in between me and whatever was making the noise in the woods before I ever put my dogs in this situation. They are babies. They wouldn't know how to handle it. I know that's not a good thing to say, but I'm nothing if not honest. Just like every other night, as soon as the sun goes down, the screaming starts and the dogs are off. Oscar winner Hugh Jackman is chasing after them as fast as he can. By the time he catches up to them, they are whimpering. They turn around and they run past him. Their hackles are raised and their tails are between their legs, and they go straight back to the cabin. At this point, I wouldn't have even made it to this point. I would have been like, we built a whole house with our hands. We can do it somewhere else, preferably a place where there's more people. But Hugh Jackman persists. He's like, this is my home. I'm going to take care of this. As he's walking, as if the forest itself is like, my brother in Christ, what are you doing? A thick fog mysteriously makes his way through the trees and covers up everything in his path. At this point, the screaming is getting louder and louder, and the closer he gets to it, the farther it seems away. Until at one point, it seems like the voice has him completely surrounded. He can't see anything. He doesn't know what direction he's moving in. He doesn't know how far away he is from the cabin, and this screaming voice is completely around him. And just like I do every time I go to the grocery store, Hugh Jackman gets violently overstimulated. He falls to the ground and tries to figure out what he's going to do. Finally, he thinks, okay, maybe if whatever's causing this noise can't see me, it will go look for me. And so he turns off his lantern, and immediately the screaming stops. He takes a second to try to regain his composure, and all he can hear is the sound of the forest around him, until a few moments later, he hears a very quiet, faint scream. After a few seconds, he realizes that's not the same scream that I've been hearing for the past few nights. And just as he has that thought, he hears a couple more voices also screaming, and he realizes that he recognizes the voices. He gets up and he takes off running towards the voices. He's going as hard as he can. His lungs are burning. Every second feels like hours. He's tripping over all the plants. He's trying everything he can until finally he gets to the cabin that he built with his bare hands. And once he arrives, he is met with complete silence. He runs up the front porch and he notices that the front door has been completely torn off its hinges. He makes his way inside and immediately falls to his knees. Inside, his entire family has been absolutely ripped to shreds. Their blood is on the wall, their limbs are strung all over the place, and he doesn't know whose body part belongs to who. He rests there for several minutes, looking at the carnage around him, and finally he's overcome with a violent rage. He decides that he's going out there, and if he doesn't kill what did this, it's gonna kill him. So he grabs an axe, a torch, and a rifle, and he makes his way into the woods, and this is where the story splits. Many people will tell you that once that man made it back out into the woods, he encountered the spirit of a young girl. She was hovering above the ground, and she was wrapped in a light blue mist. And as she moved along the ground, the mist consumed all the plant life and all the living things and left nothing but a dull blue flame behind it. Many people believe that the White Bluff Screamer is actually a banshee. It's a spirit from Irish folklore that also shows up in Scottish and Welsh folklore. It originates around 1320 and is often depicted as the spirit of a young girl or an elderly woman. And I'm just going to say, either way, would. Sometimes they would appear in person, and sometimes you would only know they were there by the sound of their scream. It was either depicted as the scream of a woman being murdered or the scream of a woman mourning someone who has died. What never changed is that the appearance of a banshee meant someone in your family was about to die. And people took and still take this very seriously. There's stories of soldiers being on the battlefield in the heat of war, and they hear what they think is a banshee, and they drop what they're doing and immediately go home. So case closed, right? Obviously, the White Bluff Screamer is a banshee. I mean, it would make sense. a lot of the people that moved there were Irish immigrants. So they would bring this with them and it would spread along to the other people, right? Like, case closed. Wrong. Because like I said, the story splits. While some people say that what the man saw out there was a banshee, other people say what he actually saw was a giant beast the size of two men with long, sharp fangs, long, sharp claws, and covered in thick white fur. Now, here's just a little fun fact that I just want to throw in there for no particular reason. Deep in Montgomery Bell State Park, there's an area known as Hall Springs, but most people know it by its nickname, Werewolf Springs. Yes! Woo! We got a werewolf. Sorry. The legend of Werewolf Springs, it's so fucking cool, begins at the end of the American Civil War. What you need to know is that during the 1860s, railroad tracks were built through Dixon County and a bunch of towns and rail stations popped up around it. The legend goes that in the late 1860s, a circus was traveling by train from Nashville, Tennessee to Memphis, Tennessee, and it derailed in Dixon County at an area called Burns Station. Now, miraculously, all the humans survived, but most of the animals broke out of their cages and ran into the woods. And so all the people working for the circus spent the entire night searching for these animals. Now, luckily, they were able to recover most of them by the next morning, but not all of them. Notably and most importantly, there were two creatures known as the Wolfmen of Borneo. They were said to be half man, half wolf, and have the ability to shapeshift at will. But the next morning, they jumped on the first train to Memphis because they didn't want to miss their next show. Which is hilarious to me, that in this story, they were just like, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Like, what's the worst that two shape-shifting werewolves could do? What are they gonna do, call us? So they got on the train and they left. And somehow, for 2 years, nothing happened. Until one night, a local man and his foreman are traveling through White Bluff on their way to a homestead. They're traveling by horse and buggy. It's nighttime, it's raining, it's muddy. This journey has ended up way more complicated than they ever could have hoped for. They were both tired, very irritated. At one point during the night, the foreman tells his boss, I'm pretty sure we're being watched. And the boss is like, you're paranoid, you're tired, take it easy. A little while later, the foreman's like, not only am I sure we're being watched, we're being followed. But just as the man was about to turn around and tell his foreman he was being a pussy, they're interrupted by the sound of a woman screaming. Sound familiar? They turn around and they see a giant beast chasing them on all fours. The man tries to get his horses to go faster, but the wheels are stuck in the mud and they're just fighting to move forward at all. So he and his foreman both jump out of the wagon and run in separate directions. The man is fighting through the bush, slipping on the mud, just trying anything he can do to get some distance from the wagon, when he hears a loud howl and the sound of his foreman pleading for help. He takes this as an opportunity to escape, just like your employer would do to you. Eventually, the man makes it back to Burns. He finds the sheriff and tells him what happened. And surprisingly, not only does the sheriff believe him immediately, he says there are multiple sightings of the same exact creature in that area. So the sheriff and this man go around Burns and they form a mob ready to take matters into their own hands. One man brings one of his goats out to the woods. And let me just say, I met a goat recently. It changed my life. This part of the story is absolutely devastating to me. At some point, we're going to have to talk about my extreme lack of regard for human life and my oversensitivity to animal life. They tie the goat to a tree, and then they all hide in a clearing. They wait for several hours, and the creature doesn't show up. Just as they're about to call the hunt off, they hear a loud scream. The creature rushes to the goat, and all the men start firing their rifles. After the excitement, they hold up a lantern to see what happened. The creature, the goat, and two men who were a part of their mob are gone. At this point, the sheriff's done. He's like, fuck, I've got to do something. And so he finds a man in Burns who's known as a big game hunter. And I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, in my mind, this man's played by Nicolas Cage. It doesn't even have to be a specific version of Nicolas Cage. You just pick whatever your favorite is. The sheriff explains the situation, and through what I assume is a combination of testosterone and some kind of death wish, Nicolas Cage agrees to kill the creature. The sheriff sets him up in a really sweet cabin, and Nick Cage is like, give me a couple days, I'll have this sorted out. For 2 days and nights, he roams around the area looking for any sign of the beast, and he finds nothing. Until finally, on the third night, he hears, can you guess? A howling sound. You thought I was going to say a woman screaming, idiot. Sorry. The hunter looks out his window, and across the clearing, he sees a giant wolf-like it was a werewolf. I don't know why I'm being so precious about it. Like, the story is called The Legend of Werewolf Springs. I don't know why. Like, it's a werewolf. He sees the werewolf, and he fires his rifle at it. The werewolf turns around and immediately charges at the cabin. And honestly, from the wolf's perspective, I see where he's coming from. He rams against the door, and the door starts to crack. The hunter starts firing rounds into the door, and either he is the worst shot of all time, or the wolf just doesn't care because he just keeps pushing on the door. The hunter runs around the cabin and moves all the heavy furniture he can in front of the door. At this point, the wolf runs around to the back of the cabin and starts pushing against the back wall, and it starts to buckle. The hunter doesn't know what to do, so he fires another round into the wall, and this time, the wolf runs away. Now, this hunter had a lot of experience with predators. There's a better way to say that. This hunter had a lot of experience with predatory animals, so he knew the wolf was coming back. He grabs all the weapons he has and what little ammo he has left, and he climbs up into the rafters. And sure enough, the wolf bursts through the door, and all the heavy furniture goes across the cabin. The wolf immediately sees the hunter and starts clawing and biting and scratching and trying to get up to the rafters to him. The hunter fires rounds directly into his skin, and not only is it not affecting the wolf, it's actually just pissing him off. Nicolas Cage is resigned to his fate, and he holds onto the rafters and waits for what's next. And out of the corner of his eye, he sees the smallest glimpse of sunlight peeking through the cabin. The wolf sees it too and immediately rushes out of the cabin and back into the woods. This time, the hunter takes his chances. He grabs everything he can carry and he runs out of the cabin, and he doesn't stop running until he makes it back to Burns. Now, for 160 years, there have been multiple other sightings of the werewolf. One notable story is that a little girl went missing around Hall Springs looking for water. Legend has it that a search party went looking for her, and they found a cave in a place called Creech Hollow. And in the cave, they found various animal and human bones. The little girl was never seen again, and the cave where the wolf supposedly lived was turned into a man-made reservoir. And a lot of locals will tell you they did that to destroy the werewolf's home. And many people say you can still find animal bones in the surrounding areas. Now, you might be thinking, Hoffman, earlier you said the White Bluff Screamer was just a 100-year-old infant, and now you're saying it's 160 years old? That's not consistent. Clearly, you wrote this script without using an outline. And to that, I would say, I'm just glad you paid that much attention. Also, it depends on how you take the story, because there are two camps of people. There's one camp that says the banshee-like spirit and the werewolf are actually the same creature, and people have different interpretations based on their experiences. The other camp says that there is a banshee and a werewolf, and they both just happen to be fucking up Dixon County, Tennessee. It's been brought to my attention that I probably don't need to spend time explaining whether or not there's evidence that banshees or werewolves exist and or live in Tennessee, but I'm a huge nerd, so I'm gonna do it anyway. First of all, just like a ton of these urban legends I've been covering, we don't know where this one started. This one was passed down almost completely orally, and we don't have an original written publication, which is really cool. A lot of people think it was just a story spread to kids to scare them when they go camping, which is hilarious to me. There are accounts of a lot of people, including park rangers, finding abandoned cabins in the area. And who knows, one of these cabins could be from the original story from the 1920s. One of these could be the cabin that the hunter stayed in when he was trying to find the werewolf. But a ton of people moved to the area before it was declared a state park, so that could be anyone's cabin. Also, there have been a lot of animal bones found in the area, and a lot of people freak out because there's been horse and mule bones found. But like I said, a lot of people were traveling by horse and had mules, so I don't think it's unexpected to find those. As far as the story of the circus, there actually were a ton of train derailments around that time, but none of them specifically say that it was a circus. Also, during the Civil War, I'm pretty sure that most of the trains were carrying soldiers and ammo. I don't know that a lot of the railroads would have been open to civilians. The biggest evidence I found against the story is that the Hall family, who Hall Springs is named after, lived in the area for generations, and they have tons of written recordings of what life was like None of them mentioned any kind of banshee or werewolf. But to be fair, that could be that they just had a really good relationship with the White Bluff Screamer and didn't want to be a snitch. And honestly, I respect that. Either way, I think this is just an insanely cool story. I love ghosts. I love werewolves. The fact that there's a place in Tennessee where one or both of those may exist is so fucking cool to me. I love the story. I love these traditions. I just think it's awesome. To this day, people who live in White Bluff and people who visit White Bluff say there's something weird. They say that when you're out at night, it feels like you're being watched, and a lot of times they say it feels like you're being followed. And there have been accounts of people who visit and supposedly know nothing about the legend who say they hear the sound of a woman screaming. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about the White Bluff Screamer? Do you like the story? Do you think it's a werewolf? Do you think it's a banshee? Do you think maybe it's some other third thing? Let me know. And as always, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.